Hey, I'm Stephanie, and it's time to talk about makeup. Welcome to today's brand review video, where I'll be talking about Zeesea Cosmetics. Now, if you've been watching my channel for any length of time, you probably already know that I'm currently on a low buy, or what some people would call a replacements only no buy, for the entire year of 2022. That means I'm not purchasing any new makeup this year, which might make it strange for some people that I'm posting a review video, since most channels that post reviews are posting about, the newest of the new releases. This makeup is not new. I purchased it last year, but because I'm on a low buy, it's really giving me an opportunity to focus on enjoying what I have and getting to know my makeup products better. And so I feel like that gives me a great basis to do a deep dive review on this brand, since I have 4 different products from them. So I'll be sharing my experiences about that today. So if you really enjoy beauty content, especially content that focuses more on enjoying makeup, than maybe on purchasing new stuff all the time, then feel free to subscribe here. I know that I would love to see you again. About a year ago, I purchased 1 blush, 1 lipstick, 1 eyeliner, and 1 eyeshadow palette from Zeesea Cosmetics because I'd heard a lot about the brand, but had never seen any of it in person. And to be honest, it looked kind of intriguing to me. So I spent my own money, I splurged, I bought those 4 things, and I've spent about a year with them now. So I think I've got a pretty good feel for them, and I'll be talking about my experience with all of those things today. I'll include swatches and application footage in addition to talking about how each of these products performed, and that's a lot of information. So as always, I will leave timestamps in the show notes so that you can simply skip to the information that's most relevant for you. Let's begin with the ordering and shipping experience. The Zeesea website is generally easy to navigate. The only issue I really noticed was that the names of the products are kind of inconsistent. Case in point, the eyeshadow palette that I ordered, if I look on the website, it's called the Sphinx 10 palette. However, if I look at the back of the palette that I actually received, it's called the Zeesea Fireworks 16 color eyeshadow 10 palette. Now, the name doesn't really matter to me, so I don't really care. All that was important to me was that the product I saw on the website was what I received in the mail. So the packaging was the same, the eyeshadows were exactly what I was expecting, so I was perfectly happy. However, I can imagine a scenario where someone hears about the palette, maybe through a review, or maybe you're visiting a friend and you're playing with their makeup and you see, oh, I really like this Zeesea Fireworks 16 color eyeshadow 10 palette, and you go to the website, you type in that name in the search, and you can't find it for some reason. So I can imagine it's not the best situation. So what I would say, based on my experience anyway, is it's probably better to make your purchasing decisions based on the images that you see on the website and not so much on the product names. Shipping was unbelievably fast. My order made it from China to Germany in just 2 days and was delivered directly to my doorstep, and that was just standard shipping. I did not pay for express or anything. But to be fair, I did make this order over a year ago, and I do feel like the supply chain situation keeps getting more dire, so I can't speak to how the situation would be today. All I can talk about is the experience that I had, and I have to say, it was great. As for how my product was packaged, well, if you have ever ordered anything from Sephora or Ulta in the US, you know how catastrophically bad some companies package their items. When you order from those places, it's like a 50-50 chance as to whether your items are going to come intact or not. That is not the case with Zeesea Cosmetics. I remember being impressed with how securely everything was packaged. My order came in a cardboard box that had plastic filler, and it was packed in such a way that there was no way any of those items was going to move. And I do remember thinking I kind of tend to prefer more recyclable packaging materials, but I will make an exception in this case because I've been able to reuse the filler over and over again. In fact, I still have it right here. They use this kind of box bag thing. All of the items were securely packaged inside here, and then this was taped shut. And I have to say, I have reused this over and over again, so many times ever since, to transport things that are fragile whenever I'm traveling. So this has come in really handy, and I have to say, the shipping experience that I had with Zeesea was chef's kiss good. Now that we've discussed the shopping experience, let's get to the exciting part. The makeup, which, by the way, I am wearing today so that you can get an idea of what it looks like in real life. Let's start with the blush. The Zeesea Blush Compact is, I think, maybe one of the first things people notice about the line because it's just so opulent. I mean, it's shiny, it's detailed. I'll bring you in a little bit closer so you can see all that detail on there. So, you know, it really catches the light, it catches your eye. It's got this little dangly doohickey there. So it just, everything about this is kind of extra, right? But one of the things you can't tell from the promo photos is that it's made out of plastic. That doesn't make it horrible. A lot of nice looking compacts are made out of plastic, but, you know, one could assume that this is made out of metal. It's definitely not, definitely plastic, but it is weighted. So it has like a nice kind of premium feeling weight to it. And it has a magnetic closure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you that it's going to kind of close itself once it gets close enough. See, so the magnetic closure is really nice and it works pretty well. Like it's, you know, it takes a little bit of effort to open it, which I think is good, especially if you have this like in a makeup bag. The quality of the mirror, I'm not going to show you just because I don't want to blind you, but the quality of the mirror is actually really nice. It doesn't distort anything. Sometimes when you get compacts like this, the mirror can be a little bit wonky and distort light a little bit, but this actually is a very nice mirror. So all in all, you know, the compact is nice. Now, if you saw my speed review of this product in my, I think it was my June 22 and 22 Project Pan update, you might recall that I thought this blush was just fine. I wasn't particularly impressed by it, but I also didn't hate it. However, I later had a discussion with one of you in the comments, and we were talking about what a shame it was that such an opulent package contained such a humdrum product. And I began to think that I might have had unrealistic expectations for the blush inside because of the ostentatious packaging. When I saw the component, it looked so magical that the little girl in me just thought that the product inside would transform me into whatever my style ideal might be at any given moment. That the powder inside must be enchanted fairy dust with amazing transformative powers instead of powdered pigments pressed in a factory. What can I say? My inner child is alive and well. So I decided to be more grown up, at least while testing this blush, and I revisited it in the coming months, ignoring the packaging and simply focusing on the results on my face, which, to be honest, is what I wanted to do in the first place before I got distracted by that packaging. And I ended up liking this blush so much more than I initially thought because it's a really good blush. It's pigmented, but it blends well. It has wonderful staying power. In fact, it doesn't even fade after an evening on the stage, and I have tested it that way. And it has a very flattering satin finish. So let's take a closer look. The blush contains 3 differently colored powders, this terracotta color, a faded coral color, and this white powder. Now, just by looking at the pan, one could think that one might be able to adjust the color of the blush slightly by focusing a blush brush on different areas of the pan, but that is not what happens, practically speaking. If you use a typical swishing motion, then you end up picking up all 3 powders at once and they mix. So to show you the colors of this blush, I'm going to swatch the colors individually, but then I'm going to do a swatch of all 3 colors mixed together so that you can see how this blush actually looks on a practical level. Here is a close-up of the colors. Here's that terracotta color. Here is the coral color. And here is that white powder. And as you can see, the individual powders have very different colors, but what ends up happening is you get something that looks more like this, and this will be a swatch at the top. It's kind of like mostly a combination between these 2 colors. So a little bit less saturated than this, a little bit more saturated than that. It's a nice color, but it's very pigmented. If you just go in with like this Bobbi Brown blush brush, first of all, you can see that it kicks up a little bit in the pan. So I'm gonna tap some off there. But if I just do one swipe, I'm not sure that the lighting's gonna really show it, but that is a very pigmented blush right there. And the good thing is it blends out easily. So, you know, it's not hard to use, but I like to go in with a light hand and then build it up slowly. And even when I build it up slowly, it builds up faster than some other blushes that I have, but I really like it. I think the finish is very nice. I also tried to find some comparisons for this blush. I was unable to find any color dupes or finish dupes. This is the blush we're talking about. This one, I think, from Clinique, this is Ginger Pop. I think it's kind of easy to see the correlation between this kind of corally color and this corally color, but they aren't exactly the same in color or finish. This is NARS Exhibit A, and look how red that is in the pan. So I just thought it would be fun to do kind of like a comparison swatch of all of these. We'll do Exhibit A here. We'll do the Zeesea Palace Identity blush on the middle finger. And then the Clinique Ginger Pop blush here on my ring finger. And so here we have Exhibit A, the Zeesea blush, and the Clinique blush. And we can already see that they're very different. These are just the two closest blushes that I had. But they're not really close at all. This one's pinkier. This one's, of course, much more vividly red. So here is NARS Exhibit A. Here is the Zeesea blush. And here is the Clinique Cheek Pop in Ginger Pop. So this is what they look like blended out a bit. So when we look at a direct comparison, we can see that the finish of all three is a little bit different. The NARS Exhibit A blush is kind of like a, I don't know, I'd say like a satin matte. Almost a complete matte, but I think it ends up being a satin matte. The finish of the Zeesea blush is a satin. And the finish of the Clinique Pop blush is, it's got almost like a subtle highlighting quality. So this is the most matte of all of them. The NARS blush, the Zeesea blush is kind of in the middle, and the Clinique blush is the most shimmery of all of them, even though none of them are highlighting blushes. But as for color, in this group of swatches, the Clinique is quite pink. The Zeesea blush is actually the most neutral of them, and then the NARS blush is the most red. And as I said, these were the most similar blushes that I had. So I guess that's good because it means that, you know, I don't have doubles of a lot of things in my collection. So I guess I guess it's good to see that. Now, as the year progresses, one of the things that I'm starting to do is take a much more critical look at the makeup that I have and deciding what I really genuinely want to keep, and then the makeup that might be better to pass on. And so the question is, do I want to keep this beautiful blush? Now, it definitely meets the basic prerequisite of being good quality, but that alone isn't worth it to me. But there are two reasons that I've decided to keep this blush, and one of them is that the color is unique to my collection, but more importantly, it suits me. And the reason I say more importantly it suits me is because that means I'll use it. I'm currently trying to transition away from keeping beautiful things just because they're pretty. Not that I think that there's anything wrong with that. It's just that I no longer want to devote the space in my home or in my head to things that I am not going to actively enjoy. And I do think that this blush is a little bit brighter than what I typically reach for, but it definitely has the potential to get used. So time will, of course, tell if that's the case, but I really genuinely think it has a lot of potential to get a lot of use. And so I'm going to keep it and see, you know, how it vibes with the rest of my more edited collection as I edit things down. Speaking of colors, if you are really intrigued by this compact, but this color blush isn't really your thing, I was recently on the Zeesea website and I did see that they have since come out with other colors of this blush in this compact. They've also added a highlighter, a contour, a translucent powder, and even eyeshadow palettes that all come in this compact. So I can't speak to the quality of those since I haven't tried them, and sometimes different colorways can do different things. But, you know, it's interesting. So I will leave a link to that in the show notes just in case you're interested in taking a closer look. But if you happen to have experience with any of those things, the blushes or any of the powders or the eyeshadows, swatches, please let me know in the comments because I'm really curious about them. Now, let's move on to the lipstick. I purchased the Dragon Velvet lipstick in the shade M10. When you buy this lipstick, it comes with a dragon friend. My dragon's name is Fufu. The packaging on this one is also pretty darn bombastic. It's not super practical if you want to throw this in your purse. I imagine the dragon's antlers could potentially break off. Maybe even its little nose could break off. But, I mean, in and of itself, if this is just the sort of thing that's going to be sitting on your vanity, it is kind of impressive and quite original. It reminds me a little bit of like a Charlotte Tilbury lipstick from the design, except the fact that you've got a dragon crawling over it makes it a little bit more exotic. This is a magnetic closure, so if you can see, it's going to kind of pull itself together. The component feels like this part actually might be metal, but this part is definitely plastic. So the dragon friend there is definitely plastic. When it comes to the actual bullet itself, it's also pretty impressive. Let me see if we can get this to focus. It's got this beautiful embossed design on it. And I mean, that's not important to the performance of the lipstick, but I have to admit it is really fun every single time I take this lipstick out just to see the beautiful details there in the side. When it comes to the smell and taste of this lipstick, it doesn't taste like anything, but it smells very mildly of vanilla wafers, which I think is pretty pleasant, but maybe some might not. So I thought it was worth mentioning. The finish of this is matte. It has like a very silicone-y feel to it, but as you can see, there's no shine. It's a pretty flat matte color, and this is like a perfect nude for my lips. I feel like, you know, it's super easy for me to wear, so I'm really glad that I got it in this color because it's definitely something that I will be able to use up. But I have to admit, I have some very similar lipsticks to this color in my collection, so I'm going to do some swatches for you now. When it comes to comparisons, I managed to find 4 lipsticks in my collection that I thought were comparable to the Zeesea, and I tried to find as big a price range as possible. Unfortunately, I don't have any drugstore lipsticks that have a matte finish, so I wasn't able to find one of those, but I did try to find quite a price range. So it goes from high-end to luxury, and they get more expensive as you go in this direction. So the lowest priced one is the MAC matte lipstick formula, which I believe retails for 19 American dollars. And the most expensive one we have in this little lineup here is this one from Gucci, which I believe retails for 42 American dollars. And as you can see, the Zeesea one comes in at the lower end of the spectrum, but it's still not cheap. This is the $19 MAC lipstick. I believe the Zeesea retails for 29 American dollars. This Charlotte Tilbury lipstick retails for 36 American dollars. This Lisa Eldridge lipstick retails for 39 American dollars, and then the Gucci at 42. So quite a range. I think all of them are beautiful, but let's do some swatches so you can see how the formulas and colors compare, because I feel like when looking for a nude lipstick, nuance is everything. I mean, it's important in color in general on the face, but I feel like nude lipstick is very particular, and even just a slight difference in tone can take a lipstick from making me look sickly to making me look beautiful. So nude lipsticks are always really tough, but all of these happen to work really well for my skin tone and for my preferences. So let's get into some swatches. We'll start with the Zeesea, and we'll do like one long swatch so we can compare that. Let's do that here. So here we have just one really long swipe of the Zeesea lipstick, and you can see that it's not completely opaque, but it does have very nice color payoff, and you can layer it. I'm going to do that here. You can build it up a little bit, so you can build up its intensity. So this is what it looks like with just one swipe, and this is what it looks like when you layer it on top of itself, and it does layer nicely. So that is the color and finish of this lipstick. But what does it look like in comparison to some of the others? Well, this is MAC's Velvet Teddy Matte Lipstick. And so it's also a matte formula. And here is one swipe of that. just so you can see. And I feel like it has more of a sheen. I feel like the Zeesea lipstick is more matte, whereas this one has just a very slight sheen. I would still definitely call it a matte lipstick. It's not a satin by any means, but the color intensity is a little bit more with a Velvet Teddy, and the shine is just a teeny tiny bit more. So let's give a close-up of those. Then next up, we have the Charlotte Tilbury lipstick in the shade Very Victoria. And this one is, I think it retails for $36 US. So it's like the middle of the board. And there we have Very Victoria. And I don't know if you can see from the lighting in this swatch, but this is actually the glossiest of all the formulas. All of them are matte. So none of them are going to be really glossy or satin, but it does have more shine than this. The Charlotte Tilbury lipstick is actually less matte, so it has a little bit more of a sheen to it. Both of them are just as comfortable to wear. I feel like actually the Charlotte Tilbury is a tad more comfortable to wear because it has just a little bit more slip to it, but both of them are extremely comfortable. I feel like the color of the Very Victoria is much more similar to the Zeesea than Velvet Teddy is. I feel like they're a closer match, but still not 100% of a match. I feel like the Zeesea one is a little bit, tad bit peachier, whereas the Very Victoria leans a little bit more mauve. Then we have the Lisa Eldridge lipstick, which I believe retails for $39 American dollars. And here is one swipe of that. And this is actually, when I first tried this formula reminded me most of this one and the Gucci one, which are the highest end ones that I have here, which I thought was impressive. But what you can see is that you get more payoff immediately with the Lisa Eldridge lipstick. This is just one swipe compared to the one swipe here, but I feel like you can build them up to the same intensity. Color-wise, I thought that they are very similar. Especially once you build it up. But the Lisa Eldridge has a little bit more pink in it, is a little bit warmer. This almost looks a little bit more brown, like peachy brown in comparison. But they feel very similar on the lips. And I feel like both of these kind of give you the look as if you're painting your face. Not in like a horribly artificial way. It looks like a very artful painting of the face. But like I feel like a lipstick like the Velvet Teddy one, and the way that I tend to wear it, or the Charlotte Tilbury ones with a little bit more sheen to them. For some reason, I feel like I can make them look a little bit more like they're actually the skin of my lips, whereas these tend to look a little bit more painted on, but in a very beautiful way. And then the last one we have is this velvet matte in the shade The Painted Veil from Gucci. This is the most expensive one, retailing for $42 American dollars. And this one also has very extreme payoff with just one swipe. So these two, I would say, have the most extreme opacity with one swipe out of all of them. And this one also has kind of like a dry, powdery feeling that ends up looking kind of painted on. So the Lisa Eldridge lipstick, the Gucci lipstick, and the Zeesea lipstick all give me a kind of very subtle painted feeling when I put them on my lips. I feel like the closest color match would probably be either Very Victoria or the Lisa Eldridge Velvet Fawn shade. Because it depends on how much opacity you have, because if you look at this swatch, I feel like it's closer to these two, but I feel like any one of these work beautifully for me, and I enjoy all of them. And the funny thing is, I feel like the Zeesea formula, which retails for $29, is the most comparable formula-wise to the Lisa Eldridge and the Gucci lipsticks, which are the two most expensive lipsticks I have in this lineup. To sum up the lipstick, I think it's great. Not only do I have a new dragon friend in Fufu, but I also have a lipstick in a color that's right up my alley, in a formula that's comfortable to wear, with a scent that's yummy yet unobtrusive. So it's just all around been a beautifully positive experience with this lipstick. Do I absolutely think you need to run out and get it? No. I really enjoyed this as much as any of the other lipsticks that I swatched for you today. So if you already have a matte nude lipstick that you really enjoy, I would just stick with that one. I honestly think the most special thing about this, the most original thing, is the packaging and the embossing on the bullet. Other than that, it's just a great formula. If you're looking for a new one, I do think this is a really great option if you're looking for a new lipstick. Or of course, if you need a dragon friend, I guess. That's also a reason. Now let's move on to the eyeliner. Apparently this is another one of those products that has a different name on the website than it does in person. The website calls this eyeliner the Palace Identity Fairy Deer Liquid Eyeliner Pencil in shade 2 Brown Brown. When you get it in person, at least mine calls it the Deer Autumn Air Ink Eyeliner. Potato, potato. Now, if you watched I believe it was my April 22 in 22 Project Pan update, which again, I will link in the show notes, you might already be aware of my initial feelings about this brown liquid eyeliner. However, my relationship with this product has definitely evolved over time, once again demonstrating the value of really getting a lot of use out of your products. Initially, I could not stand this because it bled so badly. I would apply the thinnest of thin lines right above my lashes and the product would suddenly just bleed up my entire eyelid, making me look like I was in some sort of horror movie and my eyeballs were about to be sucked into my skull. But my low buy year saved me. This was the only brown liquid eyeliner that I had, and according to the rules of my particular low buy, I am not allowed to purchase a new brown liquid liner until I have used up all the brown liquid liners that I have. So I was stuck with this one. And so I decided I'd make it work. So what I did was I would always use a normal gel liner on my lash line, and then I would go in between my individual lashes with this, and the gel would block it from bleeding up my eyelids. However, one day, I forgot to put the gel liner on first. And lo and behold, this one didn't bleed. I was like, what? What changed? Suddenly, this liner worked like a dream. It allowed me to get an extremely thin line towards the inner corner, yet really thicken things up towards the outer corner, which I loved. The brush tip is flexible enough that it's easy and comfortable to use, yet has enough stability so that I have the control that I need. And the brown color is just the right intensity for my taste. I was in love. So, what changed? Well, I suspect it was my behavior. So I think the whole bleeding thing was my fault. If you shake this product, which I'm about to do right now, right next to the microphone, you can hear that there are mixer beads in here. And I think initially I wasn't shaking this well enough before I used it. And because the product wasn't mixed, the consistency was all wrong, and that's what was causing it to bleed. Now that I shake it really well before using it, I love this. It doesn't bleed at all. It's perfect and allows me to get as fine or as thick a line as I want, and it's wonderful. Wonderful, but not perfect. So let's take a closer look. The packaging of this eyeliner is plastic, but after a year of steady use and even some travel with quite a bit of getting knocked around on my vanity and in my makeup bag, none of the color or writing has faded or chipped. And with a product like this that's plastic, but that it has kind of like a gold tint to it, a lot of times you'll get like chipping around the edge, and it'll look kind of messy, but that hasn't happened with this one. The initial purchase of $24 US includes the gold pen packaging and 2 ink cartridges, which you attach here. And this is the second one, so it's lasted me about a year now with the 2 of them. Now, I wasn't able to find just the replacement cartridges on the website, but I believe that might be because it's good to regularly get a fresh tip. And since the tip only comes with the whole pen, that's probably why they do that. The only thing that really bothers me about this product is how difficult it is to remove the cap. You have to pull really hard. It's hard to demonstrate how hard you have to pull, but it's really hard. And I realize that that's a benefit when traveling because it means that the cap won't simply come off in my makeup bag. But in my day-to-day life, when this is just sitting on my vanity, I do have to admit it's pretty annoying, especially because when the cap doesn't want to come off easily, I usually resort to kind of a twisting motion to get it off, and then this happens. And I'd say that about 30 to 40% of the time when I open the cap, I end up opening the wrong end. Once it's open, however, it's really easy to use. As I mentioned before, the brush has a great balance between flexibility and stability to give me the control that I need, and the tip is extremely fine, which makes it very easy to get thin lines. The color is a great neutral brown with just the right intensity, and one pass over the skin gives me nice color payoff, which I can then darken a bit with a second or third pass if I want to, because it does layer well. It dries down almost immediately to a skin finish and stays put all day, even on my oily eyelids. So I don't know if you can see here, it has like a slight, I wouldn't call it a sheen. I think it's just, you know, my skin is a little bit glowy, and so this liner is also a little bit glowy, but it's not like a high shine eyeliner, and it's also not completely matte. It's just kind of like a nice natural in between. Now, I don't have the ideal eye shape for winged eyeliner, but this is great for making an itty bitty baby micro wing to emphasize my lash line, which is something I like to do for the stage. And it stays put, so I can also bring a tiny flick into the inner corner of my eyes to give myself a bit of added definition and drama for the stage. And as you can see, even when I layer it up, the product no longer bleeds as long as I shake it out well. All in all, I am very thankful to my low buy for forcing me to use this product and for shaming me, because as someone who has used makeup for years, I should know that when you hear mixer bees, you should probably, you know, give the product a good shake before using it. But what is it that I always say at the end of all my videos? Even stumbling can be a form of moving forward. So I am very glad that I stumbled my way into how to use this liner, because now I live it. And I would even consider repurchasing it. So would I recommend running out and going to purchase this? I mean, if you need a liquid liner and you don't have one, this is a great one to try. But if you already have a liquid liner that you're currently happy with, I don't think this is going to add some spark of specialness to your life that you don't already have. Now it's time to take a closer look at the Sphinx 10 palette, or the artist formerly known as the Zeesea Fireworks 16 Color Eyeshadow 10 palette. What a catchy name. This is what it looks like, and this is what the inside of it looks like, and this was fine. It retails for $30 American, and I feel like that's a fair price point. Like, it's not, these aren't horrible shadows, but they didn't really suit my taste as well as they could have, at least not the majority of them. So let's get into it by formula, and then I'll show you some swatches. So first of all, I think you have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 mattes in here. These mattes blend out beautifully. They go on beautifully, they blend out beautifully, they look gorgeous, but if I didn't wear a primer, they were literally completely gone within 2 hours. Totally faded, totally gone. If there was anything left in the crease, it was patchy. And the thing is, like, I would expect something like that on my oily eyelids, but when it comes to my brow bone, I don't typically have that problem on my brow bone because my brow bone isn't oily. So normally, even if I'm not wearing a primer, a matte shadow on my brow bone will stay all day, but these fade immediately. So, and that goes for all of the shadows in here. So I feel like this palette demands an eyeshadow primer. When it comes to like kind of normal shimmer metallic formulas, you get 1, 2, 3, 4 of those. And these were like, I feel like these two were very average. This one was subpar. It wasn't horrible. I could make it work, this blue shade, but it wasn't ideal. I feel like I have so many other shadows in my collection that perform so much better that I just wouldn't ever want to use this one. This one, on the other hand, I feel like was something special. The shade was beautiful. The finish is beautiful because it's got like a dimensionality to it, because the base is this very dark kind of greenish, very murky color, and then you've got like these beautiful kind of like bronze gold particles in it that just add a bunch of sheen. So this one's actually very special, I think. When it comes to this shade, this is a foiled shade, and it's the only foil in the palette, but it is beautiful. It literally looks like you're putting gold leaf on your eyelid. This one here is a pressed glitter. I don't do pressed glitters, so I didn't even try it. Can't say anything about it. This one here is what many people call a sequin shadow. It's like a matte base with some shimmer particles in it. I personally can't stand shadows like that, so I used it. It worked fine, but if anybody can tell me the point of a shadow like this, please let me know, because I think these shadows suck and don't deserve to exist. Then we have 4 toppers. 1, 2, 3, 4. These 2 I feel like are very nice if you don't know indie shadows. If you have Clionadh shadows, if you have JD Glow shadows or several other indie brands, these are going to seem very lackluster to you. But to be honest, I think they're actually kind of nice. They've got this beautiful translucent base with a glittery sheen that gives dimension. So they're very pretty. But the second you hold them next to a Clionadh or JD Glow shadow, they just look chalky and flat. So it kind of depends on what you know and what you like. This shadow I also feel like falls flat next to Clionadh shadows or JD Glow shadows, but it is very pretty. So this one I think gives a thumbs up for me. I think it's something special. This one, on the other hand, oh my gosh, this is a disaster. At its best, it looks like absolutely nothing on the lids. At its worst, it looks like a chalky mess. It's supposed to be like glittery. When you put it on your finger, you'll see in the swatches, like, it looks glittery on my finger, and then I go to swatch it out and it looks like nothing. It's just a mess. It's horrible. It's a disaster. This is the worst shadow in the palette. But let's get into some swatches. As for the standout shadows, for me personally, there were 2 real standouts, and that was this foiled gold and like this. This is a true foil. And one of the reasons it works so well is because it's not just your normal foil, it also has like extra tiny micro shimmers in it. So it actually ends up being like a magical foil, because it's even got a little bit more dimension than, say, like a typical foil from, say, maybe Anastasia Beverly Hills. They don't have the dimension that this one has. So this one is actually pretty darn special. And I really do like this one. The other really special shade to me in this palette is this. I wasn't able to dupe either of the shades in here with anything else in my collection. This is kind of just like a really shiny greenish kind of bronze color, and it's absolutely amazing. It shears out, and like, let me do some swatches for you. This is the foil, and it's like super shiny and dimensional. And then you also have this one, which looks like it could be kind of like a matte with sparkles, but it's not. Like, I feel like it's got just a very dark, kind of like greenish brown murky base with some bronze like micro glitters in it. This one here is kind of like a duochrome green gold shadow that is actually really pretty. This is actually the shiniest one in the whole thing, other than that foiled shadow, and it doesn't look like much here. But I can tell you that this one is actually very pretty on the inner corner, on the brow bone, or on the whole lid, just as a look in and of itself. I really enjoyed this particular shadow. This shadow I really enjoyed until I went and I tried to find a dupe of it in my collection, and I'll show you that a little bit later. But it looks nice here, and it is nice. And if you don't have any indie shadows, then I feel like this is like a really nice palette, because it kind of gives you some nice shiny options. But the glitters in here, in comparison to a lot of indie shadows, are very kind of dull and boring. But just like, you know, as a palette, it's not bad. Same thing with this shade here. It's also kind of like transparent, like the base is kind of transparent, which I like because I like subtlety. And so it gives you a little bit of shine without a whole lot of impact. And so these are actually some really nice shades for some really simple looks. So I did enjoy those. And as far as the mattes go, this one happened to be my favorite. It's just a mid-tone brown. It's nothing like super exciting, but it doesn't go on powdery at all. For example, this yellow shadow here goes on pretty powdery and doesn't have a whole lot of impact. Like, so, you know, I was really looking forward to this palette for the yellow, and it just kind of blends into almost nothing. So if you're looking for a subtle yellow look, this is a very nice shadow. But for me, if I'm going to wear yellow, I want it to be impactful, and this just isn't. But this shadow, I feel like, does exactly what it's supposed to do. It just kind of adds shadow and contour, and it's just really nice. It blends out beautifully, and it doesn't get powdery like that yellow one does. And then these three are nice. So I'd say these are the two standout shadows. And then these shadows here are my next favorite. Every other shade in this palette, I either totally dislike or I could just take it or leave it. So let's do some swatches of this palette. Let's see.
Sitting in the shade watching the clock. Seems to me that my watch is stopped, but it's not. Lazy summer afternoons often pass this way. Water drops creeping down my glass. Measure out the day, measuring my small town blues. I've got them small town blues. There's an old man rolling down the street, pulling his wheelchair along with his bare feet. He's always sure to be patriotic, wears so many flags it's almost idiotic, but he's proud and I'm proud too. We share the small town blues. Yeah, we've got them small town blues. Young man comes around every day. I swear he just wants to smoke his whole life away. Long as the sun's up, he's around. I don't know why this boy just doesn't get.
So let's look at some of the dupes for my favorite shades in this whole palette. Let's start off with this one because it's a really standout shade. So let me just swatch it. This is just super foiled, super pretty. Let's see, I'll just put it here maybe. Swatch it right there. And like, it's just, it has so much shine. It's just really, really special. And I'm not sure if the camera is going to pick this up. I'll try to get up really close. But there's just a lot of dimension to the shine. It's not only foiled, but it's also very, very dimensional because there's tiny little sparkles in there, and they really come out on the eye. And I feel like it really makes the eye glisten. It's a wet look gold. And what I like so much about this is its neutrality. It doesn't pull as orange or as yellow as a lot of my golds do. And so it was actually really hard for me to dupe this one. The closest that I came was this color in the Rowan palette. This is the 75 Degrees Rowan Beauty Cream Eyeshadow Palette, and this is the shade Obviously. And this was the closest I could get to it. It's got a different consistency. Here we have the Rowan shadow. And the Rowan shadow is a more transparent base. So it doesn't, so unless the shine is picking up, you don't see the gold. So they're very different. I feel like the shine impact can be the same, especially if you layer the Rowan shadow. But as you can see, they're just very, very different. On the eye, I can get a similar look, but this was pretty much the closest that I could get color-wise, neutrality-wise, because this is like a pale yellow. So it's lighter than this one, but they're both relatively neutral. But I wanted to look at some of my other really shiny shadows to see if I could find one that would match. So I looked in my Natasha Denona gold. The Natasha Denona gold palette was my first place to look, but I found a shade in the Metropolis palette. I'm not sure which shade it is because I have them all in the wrong place, but this shade here from the Metropolis palette, I feel like texture wise is very similar, but you'll see it's much bronzier. So it's like a more orangey. So it's a more orangey gold. So that is from the Natasha Denona Metropolis palette, and this one is the Zeesea shadow I like so much. So as you can see, not exactly a dupe. They are dupes, like I think texture wise and shine wise, but when it comes to the color, it's not a dupe. And what I like so much about this is not just the texture, but also the color. So I also looked in the gold palette, and even though these are beautiful gold shades, these are just metallics, and so they're not quite as foiled, and they're definitely not as dimensional. The only one that really came into question was this one. This is Kava from the gold palette, and this is so shiny, but it has just such a different color, and I love this shadow, but it's simply not a dupe. So here's the Zeesea palette, the one that we're trying to dupe, and this is Kava. And you can see that Kava is also a very different color. They both have a lot of shine, but Kava is a lot paler. So we're comparing these two right now. And yeah, they're both beautiful, but they're just not the same. I'm going to swatch this on the back of my hand as well and do a couple more comparisons. I also have this Tom Ford duo. This is the cream and powder eye color duo in the shade Sun Worship, so number 7. And this has a cream shadow. So what we can do is we can try the cream shadow, but that's definitely not going to have the same impact. So it's beautiful, but very subtle. This has more of like a satiny smoothing effect instead of a foiled effect. But of course, these Tom Ford duos come with a topper. So let's try putting the topper over that to intensify it. The topper looks like this, which is a little bit more orangey. And when we put that over the cream, we see that the shine on the cream intensifies, but it's nowhere near as intense and wet looking as the Zeesea foil. Another option that I found was this Jane Iredale, just kind of like powder shadow. And so let's try swatching this one. This one is a beautiful shadow. And it also has like little tiny sparkles in it. So it's got a lot of dimension in it, but it's also a lot paler than that yellow. So we're still not getting a dupe, really. And then the last one that I found as an option, this is the Child palette from ColourPop, and the Force was another one that I thought of, and that one is also relatively neutral. So let's try swiping this one here, and I think color-wise, this is the best dupe I've got, but it's a little greener. You can see the shift; it shifts a tiny bit green. And this one is pretty neutral from the Zeesea palette. I couldn't dupe it color-wise and texture-wise. I could either get close color-wise or close texture-wise, but I couldn't do both. When it came to my other favorite shade in this palette, it's this kind of bronzy shade here. So let me swatch this one. I was also a very big fan of this. I love the color, I love the texture, I love that it's kind of this like greeny, bronzy thing with a gold bronze shimmer. Like, that's just very pretty. And so the closest ones that I found were also not exact dupes. Once again, we have the Rowan 75 Degrees palette, and this shade in here is the closest one in this palette. So we'll swatch that here to the side, but you can see that this one is a bit warmer here. So pretty, very pretty, but definitely not a dupe. I also found a shade from one of my Urban Decay palettes. This is the shade Dark Horse from one of the Urban Decay Naked palettes. And so this one actually came the closest to this. And we can see here, shade-wise, it's the closest, but it doesn't have quite as much shimmer to it. This ends up looking more like a satin on the lid. This one looks almost like, not quite metallic, but the shimmer is just more intense. But I do feel like in the end, ultimately you can get the same effect with either one. So if you have the Naked palette with Dark Horse in it, then you can dupe this shade. I feel like it's close enough on the lid that you can get the duping effect. Although I do have to admit the shimmer on this one is pretty darn intense. And you don't get that with this one. So if that's exactly what you're looking for, like that shimmer effect with this one, then even Dark Horse won't do it. But I do think that you could maybe take like a topper shade and put it over this to get a similar effect. So for example, I'll just try that here with the Tom Ford topper. But there's a lot of topper shades out there by lots of other brands. And if I put this over it, I do feel like it gives like a more similar effect. Still not quite a dupe, but you know, you work with what you've got. I think that's the way to go. The other swatches that I wanted to show you were for these two colors here, just to demonstrate, because I do think if you only have this palette, if you don't own any indie eyeshadows, and you only own this palette, these two shades kind of can pop out as something kind of special because they've got like a transparent or a translucent base, but they've got like some really pretty glitters in them. And like I said, this is the most intense. This has the most intense glitters in here. And so this is what they look like. And then this is what they look like swatched out. Okay, so we've got these two. They don't look very intense in the swatches at all. And I'm just gonna go in one more time and re-swatch them to make sure that you can see them on camera. In real life, these shades do look very pretty, but they are subtle. They're not gonna, you know, blow you out of the water. But I do feel like they catch the light in a really nice way. But let's take, for example, these two shades. This one is Good God from JD Glow, okay? And they're not an exact color dupe, but I feel like they're close enough. And look at the intensity of the shine of Good God when you compare it to the Zeesea palette. All of a sudden the Zeesea one looks very chalky. Like when I first applied it to my arm without this comparison swatch in real life, like it looked very pretty and sparkly, and now it just looks dull and chalky next to that JD Glow shadow. So it depends on what you have and what you know, but it's like, because I know I have this, all of a sudden this shade becomes very unimpressive. The other shade I wanted to talk about was this one. So this swatch up here, and I'm going to compare it to Foiling. This one is from Cleona, and I mean, this one is also so much more intense and so much more shifty and beautiful. So like if you're looking to really have an impact and a sparkle, indie shadows are going to be the way to go. And the Zeesea palette tries to do it, but just doesn't manage it. So like, I don't know. It's like, because I know I have these two are unimpressive. So the only ones in this palette that continue to really impress me are these two. And I feel like if I could make a quad out of this palette, I would probably take this shadow here as the matte, because I really enjoy it. It's my favorite matte in the bunch. These two and this one. I feel like that would actually make a very, very special palette, and I would love that. But that's not what they did. Instead, it's 16, and there's a bunch of dud shades in here. For example, this one. This blue one, like, it's fine. It's not horrible. But, like, it's kind of dull, kind of unimpressive. The shine is very subtle. I don't know. It just it just doesn't impress me much. And I feel like you also have to like really work to build it up, so that it gets like any sort of intensity whatsoever. And I don't know. Like, I just feel like, you know, I've got a Pat McGrath shadow in a shade similar to this that's just so much more impressive.
Editing Stephanie here. I just realized that I forgot to share my final thoughts about the eyeshadow palette with you, so here goes. Overall, it was fine. Those 2 shades that I mentioned that were really special, they did impress me, and I really, really genuinely enjoyed those 2. But the rest of the palette was really just kind of humdrum, and I don't think it's worth it to pay $30 for an eyeshadow palette where 14 of them are kind of like lackluster, shades. Yes, the mattes blended well, but you can get really well blending mattes from ColourPop, So like you get more bang for your buck with that. And maybe the packaging isn't quite as opulent, but I don't know. I feel like ColourPop would be a better deal. So I personally wouldn't purchase another one of these 16 pan eyeshadow palettes from Zeesea just because it's not worth it to me. And I assume, perhaps wrongly, but I assume that all of the 16 shade palettes probably have a similar formula, and I just don't think it's worth it. So I wouldn't recommend it. And that's weird because like the whole rest of the line I felt was really solid. Like I feel in general, the Zeesea brand is really solid. And so this like kind of quality from the eyeshadow palette is like a standout in a negative way. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend it. In fact, I have decluttered the palette already, if I'm being honest. I did a make your own palette party with a couple of people who also really like makeup. And what we did was we depotted it. And I took 4 of the shades so that I could make the makeup look in this video so you could see what they look like. So I took the 2 special shades. I took the mid-tone brown and then one of the translucent shades. And then everyone else divvied up the rest of the palette. And I have to say, like, for that purpose, it was really fun. And the girls who got the eyeshadow really liked it. But they also don't have an eyeshadow collection, so they don't necessarily have anything to really compare it to. But I think this palette is just okay. But I wouldn't get one again. Yeah, I don't think they're worth it. But the rest of the brand, I think, is actually really solid. Okay, back to your regularly scheduled Stephanie.
My experience over the past year with this initial spread of 4 products has led me to believe that this brand is genuinely solid. Zeesea's products offer a joyful experience that begins with lavish packaging and follows through with easy application and beautiful wear. I'm really happy to be keeping the blush, the lipstick, and the eyeliner, but I was also very happy to pass on the eyeshadow palette because although it doesn't fit in the context of my collection that includes premium shadows, it definitely brought a lot of joy to the people that I passed it on to. So all in all, I'm very happy that I was able to purchase this collection, and I enjoy having the items that I still have, including those 4 eyeshadows that I did keep from the palette. And I also enjoyed passing the rest of it on. So I feel like it was a win, the whole situation. I don't regret purchasing any of those things. If you have any questions about what I talked about today, or if you've tried Zeesea products and you'd like to share your thoughts with us, please do in the comments. I know that I would love to hear from you. Other than that, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you have a wonderful week and that we can all remember that even stumbling can be a form of moving forward. So let's stumble in style.